We move to questions to the Minister for the Economy, and I call Steve Aiken.
One, please.
Minister.
Supply of electricity, security of electricity supply is a risk managed collaboratively by the Government, utility regulator and SONI, the electricity transmission system operator. Last week, SONI published a revised winter assessment following significant damage by Storm Dara to the Ballylumford Power Station. The assessment indicates that while the power system will experience tighter margins for the remaining winter period, under normal operating conditions there is sufficient generation to meet customer demand. Therefore, the current risk of any disruption to the electricity supply is low. The owner of Ballylumford Power Station, EP UK, is working at pace with specialist contractors to resume generation at the site as soon as possible. My officials will continue to work with the energy industry and the utility regulator to review and monitor the short, medium and long-term security of supply and ensure our changing energy system is robust and resilient.
Dr. Aiken.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for the Minister's reply. Minister, you'll be aware that previously, and particularly to do with Kilcura, there's always been a lot of difficulties with planned maintenance and the fact that the plant there is probably due to have some planned maintenance. And there is a real significant problem that if it goes down for any particular reason, there will be significant concerns about the maintenance and security of supply. The question is, Minister, is your department having engagement with the wider number of other utility users to ensure that if, for example, Kilcura goes down, that we're not in a position where we're going to have to do power shedding? And I think that is something that is of significant concern, despite the smooth tones coming out of SONI.
I think we do engage very regularly with the utility regulator and the supply side in terms of electricity and energy generally, to try and make sure, similarly with gas, to make sure that there is confidence that supplies will remain sufficient to meet our needs. Of course, we can't predict what weather circumstances might arise, but thus far, since Storm Dara, we haven't had that kind of extreme kind of weather, and the understanding is that we are sufficiently covered for the remainder of the winter. We'll keep on top of that. Officials will continue to engage with all of those in the sector to make sure that there's an understanding of what the challenges are, and that we make sure that we, in the short to medium term and short term over the winter period, but into the longer term in the future, that we build in more and more security of supply as we go forward.
Boyle.
Thank the Minister for his answers so far. Could I ask the Minister what is the timeline for a new electricity connections policy for Emil Market?
Minister.
The Department will be publishing a consultation imminently on increasing the level of socialisation of reinforcement costs for customers connecting to the distribution electricity network. It will review a number of options for sharing the reinforcement costs of the distribution network amongst all network users. My department will review the responses of the consultation after its close in mid-April with the utility regulator and expects to be publishing a decision thereafter. There are ongoing developments in other areas of connection policy in the North, including NIE Network's consultation on its cluster methodology.
David Honeyford.
Recently we had the Great British Energy Bill in front of us in committee. We're looking through the outworking of that. Can the Minister tell us what advantage that will bring us? Will there be an uplift in investment here, and what difference that would make to energy security here moving forward?
Sure. Well, we have engaged since the very first day that the government came back in. The government came into office in London in relation to these ideas. That, if you like, that it was front-loaded with the sensitive legislation, and now it's been backfilled with detail, if you like. So we are continuing to engage in relation to that. Of particular interest are community energy plans, which I think give more resilience then at a local community level, rather than the reliance on one or two large producers and distributors of electricity. So we are very keen to see what advantage there might be there. We're told that there is resource attached to some of these plans, and we will continue to investigate that with the Department of London to make sure that we get our fair share of whatever's been developing.
Right.
Is it the case, Minister, that due to climate change targets on renewable energy, targets that his department is putting pressure on the ICEM and SONI to use indigenous renewable energy instead of using cheaper interconnected energy?
No, the solutions to all of these will be a mixture of all. And of course we have to, in order to meet our targets for climate change, which the Executive and the Assembly have agreed to and are very challenging, we have to ensure that we have renewable supply, which obviously, given our location and our geography and our position on the Western Atlantic, we have a real potential there for renewable energy, a real potential for an industry to gear itself up to that, and a long-term ambition on the island of Ireland to be a net exporter of energy, which would be very beneficial, not just to security supply of our customers here, but also in terms of profit generally on the island. So it isn't a matter of trading one off against the other. It's a matter of trying to ensure that all options are open to us, so that if we do end up in the situation, which I would hope that ambition will be realised in the future, that we are a net exporter. Interconnection goes both ways, and we will be able to sell electricity off the island as well.
Jan Forsyth.
My department works closely with further and higher education institutions to support a skills pipeline that meets the needs of our local economy and addresses skills shortages. This includes a range of interventions, for example, collaborating with employers through our sectoral partnerships in order to align curricula for apprenticeships with industry needs. Promoting pathways to good careers through the career service is also part of this approach and is attracting learners to further and higher education. College development plans are another important mechanism by which the department measures performance in addressing a sub-regional skills need. My department has also worked with 3 universities on the first annual outcome agreements, which require the institutions to be responsive to the needs of the economy.
All Dan Forsyth.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. In September 2024, the Northern Ireland Audit Office published a report on developing the skills for Northern Ireland's future, which highlighted significant undersupply of skills in STEM subjects here in Northern Ireland, particularly within engineering and technology. Has the Minister taken any proactive steps since that report was published to increase the uptake of courses in these particular areas and reduce potential where we have oversupply here in Northern Ireland?
Sure.
Yes, the collaboration with the university, we introduced higher education outcome agreements for 2024-25 academic year. The outcome agreements are intended to demonstrate alignment between the department's priorities and the work of the universities, including the skills strategy and related targets. The higher education for provision in a further education setting, the department approves all higher education courses planned for delivery to ensure alignment with department priorities. The most recent data has shown that nearly half of all graduates from local universities gained a qualification in a broad STEM subject, while a quarter gained a qualification in a narrow STEM subject. But if we look at just the undergraduate full-time students graduating from university, 28% so did in a narrow STEM subject. So this is an area that we will continue to improve on. I very much welcome the report, which related to a previous period, but nonetheless there are lessons for us in that, and we will continue to work on this area.
Don Stewart.
Minister, one of the biggest barriers to further and higher education is that of funding. When will you be able to provide an update on the higher education funding review?
Sure.
Well, that continues, and it obviously is challenged by the level of funding we had. It's the case with all. I'm sure every minister who stands here, we would do more in each of these areas if we had more funding to do it with. And unfortunately, given the funding settlement that was proposed from London, we are still and remain in a very challenging situation. So we will conclude that review, and I'm sure that will be published in due course, but we will continue to argue for as much money as we can, get into the further and higher education sector to ensure that we are producing the level of skills and knowledge needed within our society to assist in the growth of the economy.
I thank the Minister for his answers so far and for his commitment to ensuring that further and higher education colleges are supported. Can I ask the Minister for his assessment as to how the department is performing in terms of increasing student numbers within further education?
Minister.
Well, we will continually monitor it. As I say, we have engaged in programmes with the colleges to ensure that we understand the numbers that are attending and the desire to increase that. I think it's gone up by something like 13.5% over the last number of years. But there is no doubt there is capacity there to do more. And I've spent quite some time over the course of the last year engaging with the individual colleges and with the college principals as a group to try and ensure that we align the provision so that there's a seamless provision across all of our colleges, that we do significant outreach and work with those who are assisting and bringing people back in to training and education and potentially work, that there is an alignment and a synchronising between colleges and those organisations that are engaged in that work in the community, and that we try and ensure we get best value. There has been a very significant investment in the estate of our colleges over the last 10-15 years, and we have a very good college estate. What we want to do is maximise the usage of it to make sure we get the best possible outcomes.
Mark Durkin.
Question 3.
Minister.
The Department is fully committed to ensuring that Ulster University's McGee expansion is done in a way that maximises the benefits to the local community and minimises the potential negative impacts. The task force is made up of local people, including a representative from the community sector. Its recently launched action plan emphasises the importance of meaningful community engagement to keep residents informed and involved. That engagement will continue through the expansion process. In addition, Ulster University has already initiated several community engagement forums. The Department will monitor and support these efforts to ensure the expanded campus integrates well with the surrounding area, delivering positive outcomes for residents and the region.
Mr Durkin.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Thank the Minister for that answer. I think everyone recognises the huge positive impact of university expansion on the area, but we have to make sure that it's managed right and that local communities aren't choked by traffic and their fabric threatened by demand for accommodation. I welcome that the chair of the task force has set up a public meeting for next month, but can the Minister expand on the efforts of the university and task force to identify opportunities for new purpose-built student accommodation?
Well, as the members are aware, and I welcome his acknowledgement that there has been very positive work done by the task force, and I think the make-up of the task force, its members being very rooted in the very community is beneficial in terms of that local engagement. But of course, accommodation is going to be a key issue in terms of expansion, and so there has been significant work done in terms of identifying land, of trying to make sure that there's an engagement with the private sector who will provide a lot of accommodation. That has already begun to work. There's engagement with the council as well to ensure that spaces become available, can be used. And there's a strong desire to ensure that the surrounding population don't get overwhelmed with student numbers. And we've seen that happening in parts of Belfast where a neighbourhood becomes essentially a student area. So there will be, from my understanding, discussion around planning restrictions to ensure there's a certain level of multi-occupied ownership of houses, and that is kept at a level to ensure that the nature of the neighbourhood is not substantially changed. So, of course, student accommodation is critical, and that was the understanding in terms of putting the task force together, to recognise that this isn't just about creating more places in the university. This is about the infrastructure in the city that is needed to accommodate that, and of course issues like transport and accommodation will be very, very central to that.
Aye, Middleton.
Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answer so far. Minister, a lot of the issues that have been faced by residents fall under the remit of other departments, not least the Council as well. These were identified in the McGee Task Force report. Minister, what can you do to support the Task Force in working with those other ministers to look at schemes such as resident parking schemes, for example, in and around the area?
Minister.
Well, I know that the Department for Infrastructure has been engaged with the task force and will remain engaged, and they're looking at issues like, as I say, the restriction of multiple ownership or multiple occupation, rather, in areas in proximity to McGee University. I think what I've done, I circulated the draft report to all the executive colleagues, and I circulated the final report to all executive colleagues to keep them informed of the development. This is an executive part of the programme for government. It was part of an all-party agreement. It's now part of a programme for government, and I, in that sense, believe and will ensure that all of executive input that is required into the development to 10,000 places is delivered from other departments as well. So I will remain engaged with colleagues as necessary, but I do know that some of them themselves have already been engaged with the task force, which is very welcome.
Ferguson.
Minister for his answers thus far. Can the Minister confirm that his department is working closely with the Ulster University to acquire land for the purpose of the expansion?
Minister.
UU are in negotiation with the owners of sites located within walking distance of the existing campus to purchase suitable lands and buildings to support the future growth of student numbers, and that work continues as we speak, and I hope that there would be announcements in relation to some of that in the very near future.
Peter Martin.
Tourism has grown substantially in recent years and there is a considerable potential for further growth. However, the introduction of the Electronic Travel Authorisation Scheme threatens that progress. That is why, on behalf of the industry, I continue to lobby the British Government for a solution. With 67% of our overseas holiday makers arriving via the south, seamless All-Ireland travel is key to the success of our tourism sector. The ETA introduces a financial and bureaucratic barrier for tourists to travel into the north. This will undoubtedly put off some people from visiting here, which will in turn impact on expenditure by international visitors in the local economy.
Mr. Martin.
I want to thank the Minister for his answer. Minister, I'm aware that you recently met with Seema Malhotra, who's an MP and the Home Office Minister for Migration and Citizenship. Can you outline if you believe that meeting was positive? And then further, could I ask the Minister what he believes is the best solution to the ETA issue? Thank you.
Well, I think you have to judge the positivity of meeting not by the pleasantness of the conversation, which was very pleasant, and the exchange of information. And we provided further written information to the Minister and the Home Office, but the outcome itself was not positive. So the outcome was that they went ahead. Not only went ahead, they then announced an increase in the fee from £10 to £16 for the electronic travel authorisation document. So we had proposed, the preferred solution was not to go ahead with the scheme at all, in recognition of our particular and unique circumstances here. The secondary proposal was to allow a 5 to 7 day waiver for people who were travelling from the south into the north but not intended to go on to Britain, and that would have covered, they estimate, in high 90% of our international visitors who come for roughly that period of time. So those solutions were put to the Home Office. They have already worked to find some practical solutions to other issues. For instance, Irish people who are residents south of the border but not necessarily Irish citizens can travel without an ETA. French school groups can travel to Britain without an ETA for some reason, but yet we didn't get movement in relation to our situation. So we will continue to press the case because there is a strong fear and recognition that this is potentially damaging to our economy. The international visitors are very high spending and they provide a very significant income from our tourism providers. So we will continue to press that case in the time ahead.
Philip McGuigan.
Regional balance. Can I ask, Minister, how the Tourism Action Plan will help develop hotels outside of Belfast?
That question is probably more appropriate to the next question. Well, if the Minister wishes
I'm not sure if the Speaker judges on the appropriateness of questions or the Tourism Action Plan does continue to support development of hotels outside the Belfast area. It is ensuring that there's an adequate mix and scale of tourist accommodation across the north, which meets visitors' expectations. The Department of Economy will review its policy to support this and to transfer accommodation support scheme from Invest NI to Tourism NI, as was recommended in the Lyons report. So we're working closely with colleagues in Tourism NI and Invest NI to bring forward this transfer of responsibilities through a working group. This also involves an independent assessment of local visitor accommodation sector to inform departmental policy and to scope further financial assistance schemes put in place by Tourism NI. The target date for completion of the transfer of functions is October 2025, and that will ensure that the current policy continues on and beyond that date.
Minister always has to be light on his feet, even when his own colleague catches him out. Diane Armstrong.
And I thank the Minister for his answers to this point. Minister, thank you also for your attempts to soften the impact of the ETA scheme. My question is to ask you to outline who will be implementing controls in the ETA scheme to ensure compliance should it come into effect.
Well, the scheme is implemented by the British Home Office. They have been a bit vague in terms of how they intend to enforce that, so they have talked about, obviously, which would be welcome, no checks in relation to crossing border, but they've talked about intelligence-led enforcement of the scheme. I'm not quite sure what that means, and despite our many engagements with them, we're still not quite sure what that means. So implementation of it is responsibility for the Home Office. We don't have a role in relation to that, but we do have a role in representing the interests of the tourism industry, and those interests are very firmly against the imposition of this scheme.
Hunter.
Thank the Minister for his answers so far. Minister, just on the ETA there, I know you're conscious of the possible risk that this could create for the Open that's coming to Portrush this year, and we want to see our businesses prosper there. What level of risk do you see the ETA scheme to the success of the championship in the upcoming year?
Well, I hope the research that's done isn't borne out. So I hope that events like the Open on the North Coast are more successful than the previous event there, and all the plans are in place to try and do that. And we will support that, because despite this setback in terms of the approach of the Home Office, we've been trying to encourage growth in tourism and spend more money in promoting tourism. The assessment done by Tourism Ireland, I think, was 1 in 5 North American visitors would reconsider coming. I think it was a higher level in terms of European visitors would consider whether they would come or not because of the ETA. So I hope that doesn't manifest itself when people do decide to come, but that is some of the research is done. We will, of course, continue to try and promote tourism wherever we can and try and ensure the best possible outcome for our people who are in the tourist industry.
Question 5 is withdrawn. Call Emma Sheeran.
Minister. I'm pleased to confirm that I launched my Tourism Vision and Action Plan on Wednesday the 15th of January. The final document is available on the Department's website. The Vision and Action Plan sets out how we plan to grow our tourism sector over the next 10 years, and I have set a strategic goal that tourism expenditure from overnight visitors will exceed $2 billion by 2035. I am indebted to the Tourism Partnership Board, which helped to identify 17 activities which are critical to achieving this ambition in a way that promotes regional balance, raises productivity, creates good jobs and lowers carbon emissions.
Ms. Sheeran.
Minister, I thank you for recently meeting the members of the Lough-Shulin Tourism Cluster along with myself from Mid-Ulster. Would you agree with me that they have massive potential for strengthening tourism in Mid-Ulster, and would you agree to visit their tourism place?
Well, I had a very constructive meeting with the several members of the tourism cluster, and the Department and Tourism NI recognise the value of all tourism clusters in the North, which raise the profile of these destinations and enhance the capability of tourism providers. Tourism NI has worked closely with a number of individual businesses and experience with the Lough-Shulin tourism cluster as well as other tourism clusters. Looking forward, it will be important to continue engagement between the tourism cluster, Tourism NI and Mid-Ulster Council. The Tourism Vision and Action Plan commits to the development of a set of destination stewardship plans for destinations across the North, and clusters can be key partners in the shaping and delivery of those plans. And of course, I'd be very happy to go and visit some of the facilities there. I have passed by them often enough on the road up to Derry, but I'd be very happy to stop when the opportunity arises.
Thank you, Minister. Can I ask, Mr. Speaker, ask you, Minister, whether you agree with the First Minister's claim that the Executive is wholly behind devoting energy and resource to getting pre-clearance for Belfast International Airport, which would be great in theory, but looks vanishingly unlikely in the circumstances. Wouldn't your department's energy be better focused elsewhere?
No, I think I agree with the First Minister in that we are putting significant effort and resources into these plans. We want to ensure, particularly in relation to tourism, which the question relates to, is that it has an opportunity in terms of the priorities that I have set in the department, which are now included in the programme for government, for regional balance, for access to jobs, for productivity growth, and also with some of the green initiatives taking place in tourism for net zero. So it is an important industry. It's a very important part of our economy. It has been undervalued, I think, in my opinion, for too long, and the task force plan that I've put together, I think, provides a degree of focus and an engagement, importantly, with the tourism industry itself in terms of the development of those plans and the implementation of them going forward.
Concord.
The latest economic evidence shows that the local labour market continues to remain very challenging, with an annual undersupply of 4,300 workers, unemployment remaining historically low at 1.6%, economic activity remaining high at 26.5%, and many sectors reporting recruitment challenges. With over 90% of the 2030 workforce already in employment, we must work with employers and sectors to support a culture of lifelong learning and to invest in skills to address current shortages and meet future challenges. Addressing skills shortages is an issue that I'm committed to. As I set out in my skills statement last July, I've created a skills fund investing in a range of training interventions focused on growth sectors and transversal skills.
Malone.
Well, we should let Mid-Ulster, as you know, is a manufacturing hub which sends products all across the world. Could the Minister advise us just in terms of digital skills, which are particularly important in the development of many businesses, especially those in the manufacturing sectors, what specific plans does the Department have for that industry, and in particular the development of artificial intelligence and how that relates to some of those businesses?
Well, I've had a number of meetings, and most recently, I think just last November, with a number of meetings over the course of the last year, 18 months, with the manufacturing sector in Mid-Ulster, and they are doing a remarkable job. And the organisation through the Mega Board, I think, adds strength to that which they're delivering. We did discuss with them opportunities and challenges within the manufacturing and engineering sector in Mid-Ulster, including the need for a skilled labour force and how the department and its partner organisations can align our provision with the needs of the industry. I think in relation to AI, we've had discussions with the department responsible in Westminster to try and get a sense on where the direction of travel is under the British government and what they might legislate for and how it might impact on us, but also to see how we can enhance the usage of that in terms of supporting our local manufacturing. So, I mean, one of my 4 objectives is productivity, and productivity is about using the latest technology to try and improve the outcome of manufacturing in particular, and we want to ensure that all of our manufacturers have access to the latest thinking and the latest learning. That's why we'll be investing in an AI centre to try and ensure people have a resource to go to for advice and support in that area.
Linda Dillon.
Ken Corley, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answer so far. Minister, you alluded to the fact that you had met with Mega just before Christmas, and it was a very good meeting, and I think that anybody would attest to the fact of the work that Mega have done. So can you confirm that Mega and other organisations, but obviously they're the one I know most about in Mid-Ulster, are actually taking a role in leading, and industry needs to be central to developing what skills are needed and how we actually train those? And can you give us some detail on what training is provided by the Skills Fund?
Well, we engage with industry, with clusters, with individual companies to ensure through things like skills academies that we have bespoke training which is needed for a particular area in order to create a skills pipeline for the people who are operating in that area. In relation to the Skills Fund, it aligns with my own economic plans. It's already supporting a range of initiatives targeting up to 8,000 individuals to upskill this financial year. These include a new Skill Up programme, developing our workforce in the childcare sector, as well as training for green skills. I'm also focused on ensuring we offer support to those with additional barriers to access learning and employment. A number of new initiatives are also being supported to provide training and additional support to individuals who are economically inactive. This includes programmes targeting those who are disabled or neurodiverse or have barriers to entering employment or learning. Additional funding is provided for a series of women returners initiatives to help individuals use learning to gain confidence and skills to re-enter the workforce. Local further education colleges and universities are taking the lead on delivering all Skills Fund programmes.
Danny Baker.
I held my Good Jobs Employment Rights public consultation between the 1st of July and the 30th of September 2024. My officials and I have engaged constructively with stakeholders throughout. My consultation focused on 4 key aspects of a good job: terms of employment, pay and benefits, voice and representation, and work-life balance. 192 responses were received, which highlighted a range of views and observations. The detailed analysis of these responses is almost complete. This analysis and other policy considerations will inform my decisions about the content of the Employment Rights Bill, which I will bring to the Executive for agreement in the months ahead.
Mr. Baker.
Minister, what is your thinking regarding careers leave?
Good Jobs Employment Rights consultation proposed to introduce a right up to 1 week of leave pro rata for unpaid eligible carers over a rolling 12-month period to provide care for a family member or other dependent who has a longer term or otherwise significant care need. We will continue obviously to engage in relation to that, and I know there are opportunities for those representing carers to make an input to this. I already have done, and to continue to make an input as we develop policy around this, and obviously to turn that into legislation and other proposals which might come forward over the course of the next year.
Quick question, Mr. Brett.
Minister, business organisations and indeed employers themselves have expressed huge concern at both the manner in which this consultation on this bill was carried out and also the lack of proposals within the department at this stage. Once the Minister has taken policy decisions, can he commit to the House today that he will go out to a further public consultation on the proposals he intends to bring in?
Minister.
Well, I have to say I engaged with the LRA, the Labour Relations Forum, just last week, which a number of business organisations were represented. I didn't hear that level of concern, but nonetheless, if the members hearing it, we will certainly endeavour to engage with that. The report to the committee last week was a report on, if you like, a summation report on the consultations. The next step is to take that, develop it into policy, which would ultimately be either legislation, advice and guidance, or other measures which might bring forward the measures that are needed in order to secure better employment for people. So we will, of course, keep the committee involved, and the committee, of course, will have opportunities, I'm sure, in terms of its deliberations to engage with business organisations, trade unions and others in relation to the content of this bill.
Moving on to topical questions, I call Sinead McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, a significant number of businesses in my constituency, restaurants and bars, have announced their closure. The same is happening throughout all constituencies here in the north. Small businesses are really suffering as a result of increases in their overheads. What is your department doing to support and stabilise small businesses and prevent them from closing, particularly those in the hospitality and tourism sector?
Well, I'd say just last week we launched that task force report into tourism hospitality, in which there's an ambition to grow that industry and grow the income for that industry, and I would hope in doing that we secure employment for people and for businesses that are working in that sector. I have no doubt these are very challenging times. We came out of COVID with all of the challenges that presented, particularly to hospitality and other small businesses, and then moved immediately into an energy crisis, a cost of living crisis, in which the material costs that people were providing tourism offerings and the income for those who were trying to avail of them one was increased and the other was reduced. So that presents a very significant challenge. The addition then of national insurance contribution increase for employers is particularly challenging for small businesses as well, and I know the Finance Minister will continue to engage with the Treasury in relation to that. So we will continue to try and grow the economy through the development of strategies, promotion of our business, promotion of investment in the area to try and increase the overall level of prosperity, which will in turn benefit the tourism and hospitality business. And we will continue, as I said, through additional investment which I have put into Tourism Ireland to promote this place as a destination and make sure that we can get more international visitors, albeit with the challenges that I was just speaking about in relation to the ETA.
Ms McLaughlin.
Minister, the incoming Irish Government is committing to reducing VAT for tourism and hospitality businesses to 9%. The UK Government affords small business rates relief at a much higher level than we do here. Minister, will you and your colleagues in the Executive commit to bringing proposals together to support our business community as they struggle to survive? Because many of them are really at the end of their tether, and they feel that there is a really hostile business environment here in Northern Ireland.
Well, I know that the Finance Minister is shortly to bring rates propositions to the Executive, and I think that she does intend to try and provide as much support to the business community as she can. When I was Minister for Finance, we reduced the business rate by 18%, because we recognised that it was a very high burden on the vast bulk of our businesses are small and medium enterprises, so it was a challenge to them. So of course I will continue to work with Executive colleagues. We all have different responsibilities in relation to that. The Department of Communities, for instance, has responsibility for the High Street. TEO had a task force in relation to the High Street. So we do need to work together, but growing the economy is an Executive priority, and I would expect all of the Executive colleagues to row in behind measures and plans and propositions which are aimed in support of that.
Mr. Speaker, one strand of the energy strategy focuses on doing more with less. It states we will set out clear targets, standards and regulations that drive improvements in energy efficiency, provide support to invest in improvements to buildings and help consumers make changes that reduce their energy usage. Can the Minister set out the steps that his department has taken to date to achieve this?
Well, we have done an energy efficiency scheme through Invest NI for businesses. and we of course will want to look at what more we can do for domestic customers. The challenge, as ever, for every department is having finances to do these things. But the executive targets in terms of reduction of carbon emissions will include much more energy efficiency. It will require much more energy efficiency in the time ahead. So we will bring forward propositions, try and support them as best we can from the limited resources in our department, but also make an argument at the executive for the collective responsibility for more energy efficiency, more use of renewables, and a reduction in our carbon emissions as a consequence of that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. Minister, have you given any consideration to supplementing the Northern Ireland Sustainable Energy Programme, and can you maybe perhaps provide your assessment as to its effectiveness?
Well, I can't as I stand here today. I would need to get some sense of that, but I'm very happy to write to the member in relation to that in the time ahead. And of course, we will give consideration to any schemes which are effective, working well, and which we can afford to do, because affordability is a key issue for us. But then again, you set that against the potential of missing targets and what that does to society here. So we will continue to lobby for more support from London, and just in answer to a previous question, we're talking about things like the GB Energy Bill, and where there are opportunities for assistance from there, we will continue to try and utilise that. But in terms of an assessment of that programme, I'm very happy to write to him in the time ahead.
Yeah, Minister, can you set out an assessment for us of your department's budget for 2025 to 2026?
Well, I suppose the short answer is very challenging, and I have no doubt that we, like most departments, got much less than we bid for. That's going to present us real challenges in terms of things like skills, like higher further education, and all of those things which the department is committed to supporting in the time ahead. But we will endeavour, and we have been meeting very regularly, both before and since Christmas, to try and make sure that our budgets stretch as far as they possibly can. We need more collaboration with other departments, and there is a significant degree of collaboration across executive colleagues on a range of matters. So I think, and we also need to ensure that both the First Deputy First and the Finance Minister in particular continue to lobby for a better budgetary outcome for us. But it is going to be a very challenging year, and then we're, as far as we understand, into a 3-year budget cycle. So I think the opportunity to try and get this right over the course of this year for the further 3 years then is one which requires us both to work together to have more efficient and more effective outcomes, to make sure that everything we're spending reaches as far as it possibly can, and that we continue to do the work with the British Government to try and ensure a decent outcome.
Mr. Kearney.
We has yat ara as octan a ustatushan lanachoshan ara. Can you give us an assurance that, notwithstanding that very dire financial situation faced by your own department, that funding for McGee will continue to be prioritised?
Minister.
Well, as I had said in relation to a previous question, the McGee project, the expansion to 10,000 students, was part of an NDNA commitment which all parties who were returning into the executive at that stage were committed to, and both governments as well, and they have a contribution to make in that regard too, because it was both governments who drafted that particular agreement. That has now been absorbed into the programme for government. I have set together a task force to work on that, because, as I say, it's not simply a matter of creating more spaces in the university, it's a matter of how does the city accommodate that. And as he will know, and others beside him will know, the city itself has identified the growth of McGee as a key catalyst in terms of its overall economic performance and improvement in that area. So it is a commitment, and I intend to honour that commitment. Of course, I expect other departments and the executive as a whole to assist us in honouring that commitment. But thus far, we have got off to a good start. There are programmes have been developed. There are more students there now than were there before. There is land identified and capital plans identified over the next, I think, up to 2032 in order to achieve this. And I think we have got off to a good start. But of course, that has to be sustained and supported as we go on. But given the fact it's part of our programme for government, I would expect executive support for doing that.
Question 4 is withdrawn. I call Stuart Dixon.
Speaker, Minister, with significant challenges around our economic activity in Northern Ireland, can you provide an update on how your proposed Good Jobs Bill will support people who are not currently in education, training or employment, and how it will assist those people in gaining access to employment?
Well, I think his point's a critical one, because we have a situation where we're very high levels of employment, low unemployment, but yet we have still remain a very high level. I think I said 26.5%. That's on average across the north. The further north and west you go, that number goes up in relation to that. So, and given the restrictions of Brexit, the ability to attract in foreign labour then is restricted. So I think anyway we have an obligation to try and work with people who are trying to find their way back in to the employment market as well, to give them the support they need. So a lot of the organisations who were involved in that have previously relied on European funding, EISF, ERDF. They then were relying on shared prosperity funding, which brought them very close to a cliff edge. We're now told that shared prosperity funding will continue for one more year, but at a reduced an amount. So we've been trying to ascertain what level of support there will be in that, because these organisations are critical in terms of their experience, their know-how, their record in working with people who are very far removed from the labour market, and the steps that are necessary to bring people back in, and then hopefully on to other skills organisations like our colleges and our universities as well. So we will continue to press the case in relation to shared prosperity to try and get an understanding, because if these programmes aren't funded, then those who provide them will be in, and those who benefit from them and rely on them will be in a very difficult situation. So we'll continue to try and get a handle on that.
Mr Dixon.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answer. Minister, a recent report has demonstrated that women over 50 in Northern Ireland are less likely to be in employment by comparison to other jurisdictions. How will your Good Jobs Bill help to deliver for those women to get them into employment? Minister.
Well, as I mentioned in an answer to one of the questions on skills, there are specific programmes for women in the skills programme, and we have had many engagements with people who represent women in employment and other women's interest groups as well in relation to that. So I think there is, when you do get to the people who are economically inactive, it tends a higher proportion than is the population of people with disabilities, young people and women. And those, I think the programmes then tailored to try and get people economically active out of that. And of course childcare will be a critical part in relation to that, allowing people the opportunity to go back into employment or into skills and learning. But those programmes need to be tailored with those groups in mind, and that's our intention.
Patrick Largate.
Can the Minister provide an assessment of the proportion of good jobs currently within the local economy? Minister.
Well, I have an assessment of the portion of good jobs, but I think part of our as I say, we set 4 prioritisations across the department, which all of its agencies have undertaken as well, and which are now part of the programme for government, the draft programme for government, which hopefully will be finalised in the very near future, which is in relation to productivity and to promoting good jobs. We brought in outside advisors to give us assistance in relation to that, and we have brought together a number of organisations on a regular basis who give advice and guidance on that. So it's not simply about the salary involved, it's also about representation in the workforce, it's about flexibility in your work, it's about value in your work as well. So there are a range of factors which go into that. There is a definition which has been there and they're continuing to work in relation to that, the Carnegie definition in relation to that, to try and achieve the outcomes that envisages in terms of good jobs. That will take time and will take effort, but that is a priority for the department. We will continue to focus on that.
Mr Delargy.
Thank the Minister for that very comprehensive answer, and I would ask the Minister as well, what impact does he think the British Government's decision to increase national insurance contributions for small businesses will have? Do you think that will make it more difficult to bring people into employment in small businesses in particular?
Minister.
Well, I think it certainly increases the challenge, and the difficulty that we've had is that was introduced with no compensatory measures to try and support small businesses. So if there had been something else along with that, but it was basically just introduced as a quick fix in one area without, in our view, any consideration, and particularly in a region like this where small and medium enterprises employ about 90% of the population who are working. So no real consideration for the consequences of that in terms of the impact there, and no alternative support to try and assist businesses to grow. So undoubtedly, and we are hearing that back from quite a number of small businesses, that's going to be a challenge. I hope it's one that they can meet. I hope the arguments in relation to mitigation and other supports land with the government in the time ahead, and that we do get that level of support, but there's no doubt that that is going to be a challenge.
Stephen Dunn.
Minister outline what destinations are under consideration for destination stewardship plans as part of your recently launched tourism vision and action plan, and outline how constituencies like my own, North Down, can benefit from it?
Well, I think the whole region will benefit from it. I think there's some like 17 actions. We brought together a very wide range of people from the industry, and I have a very firm view, which I've always had, that if you're going to design policies and plans and action plans, that you need to co-design those with people who are in the industry at the coalface, who know what works and what won't work, and to involve those with tourism ANI officials from the department. So it will now be about delivery in relation to that, and destination tourism is a part of that, because clearly we have a lot of both outdoors and indoor attractions, and which have become part of our tourism map here, and which have been very successful in terms of drawing more visitors to the area. So it's a matter of strengthening those, but also growing the other destinations that are available. And North Down, I'm sure, has plenty to offer visitors that will come to the area. So I would invite them to engage with the Tourism Action Plan, perhaps engage with the Partnership Board itself in relation to that, and to discuss through with them, because all of the industry had been represented there. There was a very strong presence at the launch from right across the sector, right across the north. People very enthusiastic for getting on with that work and growing the tourism industry in the way we want to grow it over the next number of years.
That brings to a conclusion questions to the Minister for the Economy. Sorry. Yes, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you're aware, the Secretary of State has refused to pull the Stormont Breck in spite of the request to do so by every union.